Hey everyone, it's Matt and I'm back for another Beatles video and I am happy to be doing it. Okay, now this video is going to be about the album, one that's near and dear to my heart, Beatles 6. The Beatles 6 album. And before I get into the Beatles 6 album and start talking about it a little bit, I wanted to give a little backstory as how I ended up getting into the Beatles 6 album, because there is a little bit of a story to it, nothing too heavy, but I figured I'd share it with you. When I was very, very young and getting into the Beatles in the late 60s, again, my history with the Beatles goes back to 64, as you know from my very first video, when my parents got me Meet the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night, and I was off to the races after that in 64. But as the years went on and I got a little older, as a young boy, 6, 7, 8 years old, I was really heavily a Beatles fan, getting heavy into them and looking for every opportunity to get a new album from my parents, or someone give me one, or if I had a little bit of birthday or holiday money to get a Beatles album. Well, one time my parents came home and gave me this as a gift. This is my actual one. It's a little beat up now. You remember me and my tape stories about putting tape on my Beatles albums, but and the white's a little bit discolored now, like a yellowy color, but one day my parents came home with this one for me. Now, we all know this is not one of all our favorite Beatles albums. I mean, many of it have it for collector's purposes only. How often do we really sit and listen to it? Not too often, but it is nice to have. But when I first got this, I was thrilled. It was either late 60s, 69 or so, or 1970. My parents got this album for me, The Beatles Story, and I was thrilled. Mine's on the Apple label. So excited to get this. I listened to it nonstop. I got such a kick out of it. I mean, this is long before Anthology, long before the complete Beatles, long before, you could just go on YouTube and see video footage and interviews with the Beatles. It was hard to get. So this was like cool to have, because you could hear the Beatles speaking voices, and they were being interviewed, and they were making comments and being funny and all that stuff. And I got so excited with this and just so happy to have it that for years this was like on my rotation all the time as a little kid. But anyway, we're not focusing on this today, but what happened with this, how this led me to eventually Beatles 6. I think it's side 4 on here. When you put on side 4, put the needle down on the record player back in the day. Picture a young 8, 9-year-old doing this, and all of a sudden it starts to fade in with the screams. You hear the screaming noise, sounding like a jet plane rumbling and growing and getting louder and more intense. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of all that, excuse me, the Beatles come crashing in with full vocals, guitars, drums, twist and shout. You know what I'm talking about. The first minute of, I think, side 4, the Beatles come rocking in. It's a little snippet from their Hollywood Bowl concert on August 23rd, 64. About 50 seconds or so is played of Twist and Shout, of them opening the show with Twist and Shout. And folks, it grabbed me and held on to me, and I said, I gotta have that song. I just loved that song so much. It was the first time I ever heard Twist and Shout. And I'll put this down just to show you I do have a little better version of the Beatles Story in better condition. But when I heard that Twist and Shout, I said, I've got to get that song. I wanted that song. And I remember telling my mom that, because she was the one sometimes that would take me to the stores to buy things, or my dad would bring home Beatle records, but I wanted to go to the store to find Twist and Shout. I had to have that song. I wanted it bad. And somehow I figured out, either through a cousin or somebody, that it was on this album, that you needed to get the early Beatles at that time, late 60s, like I said, early 70s maybe. You had to get this album to get Twist and Shout. And there it is, second song on side 1. Twist and Shout. I wanted the complete song. I loved it so much on the Beatles Story, I had to get it. And I wanted this album bad. Had to get the early Beatles. I knew what it looked like. Like I said, a cousin or somebody had this, so I knew what I was looking for. I knew the colors and the picture. This is what I wanted the next time I went to the store with my mom. So we went to the store, and she said, you can get one Beatles record. Okay. I believe the store was in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, for any of you in the Northeast that know Pawtucket, Rhode Island. It was a store called Apex, A-P-E-X, Apex. It was like one of those, kind of what Walmart is today. It was back in the day. It had everything. It had a music department. We go to Apex, And she said, you can get one Beatles record. And guess what I was looking for? This one. I had to find the early Beatles. Well, lo and behold, they didn't have it. I went through the whole Beatles bin countless times. I must have looked 100 times. Did I miss it? Is it stuck behind? It's got to be here. They had every other Beatles album on vinyl except that one. They did not have a copy of the early Beatles. Not one. So I didn't want to leave empty-handed. So I said, well, she said, get something else. If you can't find the one you want, you know, with Twist and Shout on it, get something else. Well, I looked further, and then all of a sudden I saw it. I liked the cover of it, and I liked the back cover photos. I said, that looks like a cool record. I don't think I knew many of the songs on it at the time, being a young boy. But I said, I'm getting that one. And this is the actual one I picked up that day. And I can prove it because look at, there's my crappy tape job, folks. You know me with the tape. If you've watched my videos for the last 2 years, I tell the story often about some of my early Beatles records and putting the Scotch tape on them to protect the bindings. I know some of you have picked on me for that. Like, you know, I went a little crazy with the Scotch tape, and it's all turned yellow since. But anyway, as an aside, I want to show you. This is my original Beatles 6. There it is. Still in pretty good shape, other than the tape. There's the back. I just love these pictures, the images of the Beatles. I love the front cover, the way the layout was, the design, and certainly that picture. I'll put it nice and close. Look at that great picture of the Beatles. All right, just wonderful picture. And this was the one I grabbed. That's my actual one. I'll show you my vinyl. It was, like I said, late 60s, early 70s. There's my vinyl. Beatles 6 on Apple. Here's the back of it. I kept it up pretty well as I'm looking at it. It's not in bad shape. A couple little, you know, surface scuffs and marks, but it's really not in bad shape. So that was my original. So I grabbed the album. I liked it, got it. And what happened was, folks, I got home and played it. I'm going to show you a couple other variations of it also. Here's one still in the shrink wrap. I loved it so much that it eventually became one of my favorite U.S. albums. Beatles 6 is one of my top dogs. Sometimes it's my #1 U.S. album. Sometimes it fluctuates, drops to 2 or 3, depends on my mood. But I love this album, folks. This is another variation. Now, it was released on June. This is a later pressing, by the way, as you can see. It's on the purple Capitol. Okay. It was released on June 14th, 1965. Which really later than I remembered it as being released, but I guess early Beatles came out earlier in the year in the spring, and then this guy came out June 14th of 65, and right before Help, when you think about it. It's not too long, only what, a month and a half or so before Help, maybe 2 months, I'm not sure. And but boy, it's a great album, a well put together album. It's about 28 minutes long, might be a little less than that, but about a little under a half an hour long. And I tell you, it's chock full of great songs. It spent 6 weeks on the number one on the charts. 6 weeks, right? Must have been right before Help came in. I'm not sure if Help displaced it or not. Maybe some of you know that answer. But 6 weeks at #1, and I'll tell you, folks, I love it. This is a little interesting. I want to show you another copy. I have a stereo copy early, and notice that the writing's a little reddish colored. I don't know how it'll show up in the video. Just to show you quick, this is on the green label. And I know, so it's an early one, but it's kind of a reddish hue, and that's the same on the other copies I showed you. If you notice, and you probably won't pick up on here, but I have an early original mono, and it's a little more of a deeper red. I don't know if that's showing up at all. I'll try to do a comparison here. But see, the top one's got a little darker reddish hue, and the bottom one's almost like a lightish red. It's just interesting to me. I don't know if it means anything, but you know, that was my green label Capitol, and then this is my here it is. My original mono Rainbow Swirl. So I have 4 copies of it. That's all I have, but I'm happy with them. I love them. Now, the first time it came out on CD was in 2004. We've talked about the Capitol albums, volumes 1 and 2 that came out. Well, on the second box set, the Capitol albums volume 2 in 2004, You got it in stereo and mono. And here's the first CD of it right here. And it's the original US mixes. Remember, we've talked about this before. On this box set, the Capitol Albums, Volume 2, nice CD cover label there. You get the original mono and stereo mix just like we got when it first came out in the day. This is the one you want right here. And here's the box. I won't even show you the box. Okay, you've all seen this before. Capitol Albums Volume 2. This is the one you want. Do not get the 2014 US Albums box set because they're just using the 2009 mono and stereo remaster mixes, which is not the sound that we remember as young people back in the 60s when this first came out. The only thing I will say this, I don't have the 2014 CD edition, like I say, because what's the point of me having it? It's just the 2009 mixes. I want the US original mixes, and that's what you get on this, okay? But I gotta say one thing, the packaging of this is very plain. See, it's just a cardboard case and the CDs inside, that's it. If you get the 2014 US Albums box set, you're going to get a much nicer design. I have to admit, the packaging design is much nicer. It looks more like a real record album cover. And on the inside, you get actually a slip sleeve for the CD, and you get a replica of the original sleeve, the blue Capitol sleeve. You get that also. So it looks like a mini version of, like, you know, one of the original albums. It's beautiful. I have to say, the packaging. I have been tempted over the years to get that complete set, so I have the pristine, great packaging and the 2014 issue, and then put my 2004 CDs in that, but that's kind of Frankensteining things, and I don't know if that'd be a cool thing to do, so maybe you can tell me if that's a good idea or not, but I've always thought of taking these CDs and putting them in the 2014 slip cases, you know, to have the right mixes with a nicer case, but I haven't done it yet. I've thought about it. So anyway, the other thing about this is that it has two awesome John Lennon lead vocal searing rock and roll songs on here. You get Bad Boy and Dizzy Miss Lizzy, which from what I understand were recorded on May 10th, 1965, which was the writer and original singer of those songs, Larry Williams. That was his birthday. And that was the day the Beatles recorded, like as I said, May 10th, 65, recorded Dizzy Miss Lizzy and Bad Boy. And they did them specifically for the American market so they could have Bad Boy to put on here. And then Dizzy Miss Lizzy is also on here to fill out the album a little bit. And I'll tell you, they're some of the greatest rock and rollers John ever did and ever sang, and they're fabulous. And it's just interesting when I read somewhere, and I think it's true, that that's Larry Williams, the day they recorded those two songs was the day of Larry Williams' birthday. So that's kind of a little piece of trivia there. And what I also found is those, the covers on this album were the last covers recorded by the Beatles in the studio until they did Maggie May for the Let It Be sessions. After the covers on here, Bad Boy and Dizzy Miss Lizzy, that was it. They didn't really record any covers on their albums until Let It Be. So that was interesting. They sold over 1 million copies of this album, so it has gone platinum. And I tell you folks, it's a great cover. It's a great song list. I love the album. To this day, I listen to it a lot. I listened to it as a little kid 50 years ago, and here I am a half a century later, still heavily into this album. I love it. Even if I ever come across a little piece of Beatles 6 memorabilia, I'll grab it. I got a little pin button here, a Beatles 6, like that. And one cool thing I have, a collectible I got, and it wasn't that much money, and I'm glad I got it. A cassette still sealed that's about 50 years old. When I bought this, I was told by the seller that this is a 1969 cassette issue of Beatles 6. And if you look close, still in the shrink. All right, there's the back. Here's the side. There we go. And here's the front again. Still sealed. Look, it has the old Capitol label down towards the bottom of the cassette. And I've just had it and just hang on to it. It sits in my little collectible drawer here, but I always thought it was a neat little collectible. I love this album so much. And when I had a chance to get this for short money, I grabbed it. And maybe you guys can tell me, but I mean, based on what I'm seeing there with that logo, because I did have a later cassette of this years ago. I had a later release cassette from the late 70s or early 80s, and it definitely didn't have this logo on it. It had the other oval-shaped Capitol logo. So I assume, based on what I'm seeing here, this is authentic, and it is a very old piece. And it's something I will never open that shrink, and will save it forever. Okay, so that's it, folks. Just wanted to do a quick video on the Beatles 6 album. Give it some love. I've done videos on Meet the Beatles before. I've done videos on the Beatles' second album. I did one not too long ago on something new, but I really felt that this album deserved a little bit of love, a little bit of attention. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my little journey and foray into the Beatles 6 album. And take care, everybody. God bless, and I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.